IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Thursday, everybody. One day closer to Friday, one day closer to Notre Dame kicking off down in Miami. But there's a lot of news to cover first and foremost. And biggest news so far of today is Notre Dame quarterback Steve Angeli announced that he intends to enter the transfer portal. That news broke little under an hour ago. And so we're going to begin today's show by breaking down that decision. We're going to talk through the backstory, what went into it, what does this mean for Notre Dame. We're going to also talk about where they go from here. And then afterwards, as you guys can see, Irish Breakdown special guest Bryan Smith and our guy Brian Driscoll are going to break down kind of college football, big picture as a whole. They're going to talk about Miami, obviously, because that's Notre Dame's first opponent on August 31st. So they have a lot of awesome content coming to you guys after we break down everything that went into Steve Angeli's decision to enter the transfer portal. So, Brian, I'm going to kick it over to you, man. It's big news. We've been covering this quarterback competition all offseason.
Trev, you got to be real careful in that because when you say, Brian, I'm kicking it to you, you don't really narrow it down very well.
That's true. That's true. I'll go Mr. Driscoll, Mr. Smith, and we'll go that today. But yeah. So backstory, Mr. Driscoll, on the Angeli decision to transfer.
Well, I mean, really, what it comes down to, Trevor, is the odds of you keeping all three of these quarterbacks for next season was always going to be slim. You know, especially with Steve, I think especially so if he wasn't going to start, especially him, because he is the one that's on pace to graduate. He'll graduate in May. And just so some people aren't clear on this, when you enter the transfer portal, you're not removed from classes and all that kind of stuff. You stay, you usually finish that semester and those type of things. And the semester's month away from being over or so. So he'll graduate in May. And Steve is one of those ones, this is not an NIL new portal window transfer. Steve is one that was always going to be able to transfer and play right away and probably would have no matter the era, because at the end of the day, he went out, he battled for the starting job, and he got beat out. And from some things I've heard, I think he got beat out by two guys by the end of the spring. And he's just – his role at Notre Dame was going to be what it had been the last couple of years, which was he was going to be a backup quarterback. And I think Steve realized that, look, my opportunities to play football are getting, smaller and smaller, and I want to go start. And I have no problem with that. I have no ill will towards that whatsoever. Here's where I would have had an issue if he just would have bailed out, not even competed this spring. But he stayed, he battled his tail off, did the best he could, and he just got beat out by two younger, better players. That's really what it comes down to. Now, I am a little surprised that the decision was made this soon. I don't know if this is finalized. I don't know that he's put his name in the portal. I was told yesterday that he's going to transfer. And then obviously the news broke today and all the different outlets kind of went with it. So then I felt, okay, we can go with it now too, because I have been able to get good sourcing on this that he's going to leave. But I don't know if this is sort of okay, it's done, the paperwork's been submitted and all of that. And they have another practice left, which is also partly why I was a little surprised by the timing. Because I'd started working on my article last night, but I was like, well, they got another practice left, and so I don't need to finish this. So when I saw the announcement, I was getting ready to eat lunch, and I'm like, oh, shoot, now I got to finish this article. And so I got that one done. But that's really, it's not a earth-shattering thing. It's not like some secret thing. Some school walked in, and he was going to start, and they offered him $5 million. It's nothing like that. He competed his tail off, and he just got beat out by better players, and now he's going to look for an opportunity to start somewhere else, which if I was in his shoes as a former college quarterback, I'd do the exact same thing Steve did. I'd compete my tail off, and if two guys were better than me, I'm going to go find another home somewhere else and get my last chance, because he's not promised an opportunity to play NFL. This could very well be his last chance to play football, and I think the kid has earned the right to be a starter somewhere. It's just not going to be at Notre Dame.
When you talk about Steve Angeli, it's somebody that in this crazy day and age of the transfer portal, he's one of the few that's done it right. And at every step of the way, every single time that he has stepped onto the game field, the practice field at Notre Dame, he's done everything that's been asked of him and conducted himself in a proper manner, including this decision whenever it does get finalized. And so it's one of those where, and it sounds like everybody in the chat and most people on the message boards all wish him the best of luck when it comes to hoping that Steve finds a lot of success outside of South Bend. But like we've talked about on the show, we do believe that this to be the right decision. So when you start looking at Notre Dame and where they go from here, what does it mean for this room initially? Because now you're starting to immediately, every action gets a reaction. And so now people are talking about what's next for this quarterback room. So, Mr. Driscoll, when you think about what does this mean for Notre Dame's quarterback room, where do you begin to evaluate that?
Well, I think the first thing is, and I'm actually going to kick it to Bryan because I want to kind of get his thoughts on this because I have talked a lot about this. I think what this shows is two things. Number one, Bryan, is it shows that Notre Dame is not going to do what a lot of people assumed, that they're just going to go with the guy that's more experienced. They're going to go with the best player. They're going to go with the guy that gives them the best a chance to win a championship. I think that, to me, is the biggest takeaway from this, Bryan, is that this is an example that Marcus Freeman is not who some people thought he was, which is I don't want to make a mistake. I'm going to play the veteran. I'm going to do this. They are saying, no, we're trying to win a championship. And even though these two guys are less experienced, these are the two kids, and, maybe ultimately it'll end up being one, that give us the best chance to have that, and that they were honest with Steve about that. And that's, from my understanding, that's kind of how this whole thing has gone down. So I think more than anything, Trev, and Bryan, I want to get your thoughts on just what it means for the quarterback room. I think that's the big takeaway for me, is there's been a lot of people this spring that have been really concerned that, like, if Steve won the job, it should have been because he won the job. He outplayed those other two guys, not because, they outplayed him, but he has a game and a drive more experience. It's because he won the job. And this tells us that Marcus Freeman's like, look, we're gonna go with the potential here because those guys are just they won the job. They've won the opportunity to continue battling for that job. And Steve is just dead. And I think that's my big takeaway, Bryan. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, but then also what you think this means for what this says about the Notre Dame quarterback room.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. But I think the biggest takeaway is that they have confidence in their coaching. It would have been a lot easier to bring Steve in and make him the quarterback because, look, worst case scenario, you're going 9-3 with him at quarterback this year. He's pretty good. The defense is really good. Your skill talent is ridiculous. He's not going to make a lot of errors. Okay. But he's not going to push the ball down the field. He's not going to be able to make some of the plays that once you get to the playoffs, you need play after play. So they looked at it from, we can develop the guys that probably need some work. They got more talent. And our goal is to win a championship. That's how I take this. I just don't think Steve there's about 5 or 6 teams that he's not going to be that consistent against. It's ironic because I know he played well in the Penn State game, the little bit that he did. But that's still just one drive. So I think that this is the right decision because it might be a little more boom or bust year one, but Carr and Minchie have far higher ceilings. And if you don't think you can coach those guys, you shouldn't be at the University of Notre Dame. That's my first take.
One of the things that you and I have been complaining about for years at Notre Dame was just sort of this being afraid to make a mistake, always erring the side of safe. And I don't want to play this guy because he's not as experienced. He's not this or he's not that. And it resulted in so many, what I believe to be mistakes from a recruiting standpoint, mistakes from a team building standpoint. And when you look at this decision, it's trusting your coaching, but it's also saying, hey, look, like sometimes you have to take some risks to get the ultimate reward. And Notre Dame took a risk last offseason by bringing in a injured quarterback that they injured, by the way, who, you weren't sure this, you weren't sure that, but you're like, this kid has the kind of ceiling that we think if it works out, it's gonna boom. And we saw after the Northern Illinois game that Marcus Freeman stayed true to his convictions of that. I think over time that turned out to be a great decision. And I also think it's a symbol too, that Notre Dame is in a position where it just further is further evidence of what Marcus Freeman has told us all along. Marcus Freeman's decision not to go to the transfer portal this offseason wasn't because of confidence in Steve Angeli, because they had Steve Angeli last year. It was confidence in the entire room, and it was more so about Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, in whatever order you want to talk about those guys. And this is what they've been building towards. They wanted that day where a homegrown kid that they developed from day one was going to be able to step in and lead this football team, and they don't have to keep doing the 1-year rentals year after year after year. I think it speaks volumes to that too, about how quickly they've been able to build up this quarterback room to where they're able to have three. There aren't a lot of teams that have three guys competing for a starting job like the three guys that Notre Dame had in the battling for the starting job this spring.
I think go ahead, man.
I was going to say another thing that I think this shows me about the coaching staff is even if a scenario played out where Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr wins the job, when you have an older player like Steve Angeli on the roster, I think there is a little bit of shades of 2012 when if Everett wasn't on, they insert a Tommy Rees type of player to get him out of a game. I think this even furthers the point that you and I have talked about before on this show, Brian, about, look, Marcus Freeman is going to stick with his guns and kind of endure the bumps and bruises of playing a more inexperienced player. Riley Leonard wasn't inexperienced in the grand scheme of college football. He was inexperienced in Mike Denbrock's offense, didn't get a spring. It was his first year at the program. And so now I think with the departure of a player like Steve Angeli, I think that even furthers, hey, whoever Marcus goes with, whoever this coaching staff goes with in the fall is who their starting quarterback is going to be for the duration of the season. We got some buy, sell, hold questions about that yesterday of if the starter, barring injury, week 1 at Notre Dame, was going to be the starter at the end of the season. And I think this also kind of furthers that narrative as well. To your point about, this is a testament to the coaching. So that's another aspect that I find really interesting about all this.
I'm hoping that Notre Dame takes advantage of this in the right way too. They got to let these guys be turned loose.
Yeah.
And I'll be surprised. I mean, I know Driscoll knows the coaching staff pretty well. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But when they go to Miami, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, they're going to come guns blazing. You can't display, you know what, let's be conservative with this. Right out of the gate, they got to let, and I assume CJ's going to win the job, but I don't know. They got to let whoever starts be themselves and make mistakes. That sucks. But if you baby them, Miami will win that game. I don't expect Denbrock to be that way, but that was my biggest concern about Freeman. Even early last year, he was a little too defensive minded for my liking, and they started to change that a little bit, especially in the comeback against Ohio State. They were slinging it all over the place.
Yeah.
You got to let your guys take some chances, or you're not going to beat the elite teams. You can do that junk against 8 of the teams on your schedule almost every year. But if you're going to be competing for titles, you got to be willing to openly throw the ball down the field and take some chances. We've seen signs of it, and we know Denbrock's done it before. But now you got to do it here.
You got to have guys who can do that, Brian. I mean, that's the thing. You have to have guys who can do that. And that's why this battle was so important. Because I think Steve, you went into the spring as the number 1 quarterback, as he should have. It should have literally just been in order of seniority. It should have been Steve, Kenny, and CJ going into the spring. And it wasn't so much about, Steve's got to hold on to the job. It was literally about, okay, somebody's still got to go earn it, though. They've got to win it. You have to beat him out. And the fact that you have 2 younger guys that have beat him out, it tells me that the talent is starting to rise. Because that's the thing, Brian. You can if the goal was to go into the season and look, we've got an elite running back room. We have the best running back in college football. And not only that, we have a running back depth chart that is the envy of everyone else in college football from a 2 to 5 or 2 to 6 standpoint right now. At least that's where it stands right now. To where you could lose 2 guys from that room, and as long as it's not number 4, it's still the best running back room in college football. And if you keep 2, it's at least the second best room in college football. If you keep 4 and 24, it's, in my opinion, the best room in college football. You've got expected to have a very good offensive line. Your defense should still be elite. So there's very much, Brian, to your point, if they were still going to play that, let's be conservative. Let's not turn the ball over. Let's build around the run game. Let's not take chances. Then 18 is your starter. And the fact that you're not because that is still the safe pick. It's the safe decision. The fact that they're not going that direction isn't that they're gambling on upside alone. There is a little bit of a gamble on upside because at the end of the day, these guys have never played a meaningful down. Kenny's only thrown 3 career passes for 16 yards. 2 of them were against Tennessee State. 1 of them was against Purdue last year. CJ's only played 1 drive of college football his entire career. There's always a risk, but what I mean by gamble is kind of making the bold choices because You're making this move because you see these are the guys that can go be the playmakers that we need at that position. And that's where I think Riley Leonard was an eye-opening experience for Marcus Freeman. Because if you're going to be the head coach from Riley Leonard, you've got to be willing to accept, what was that? What were you thinking? Why did you keep the ball there? Why did you make that throw? Why didn't you make that throw? You had to learn to accept that that's who Riley was, because what you were going to get, it was a playmaker that you were going to be like, what are you thinking? And then the next play, you're just like, I don't know anybody else can do that. And that's what you have to live with in your current circumstance. Now, 2026, it'll be a different story because you'll have a returning starter. But it also tells me that there's a confidence in what's around the quarterback. That can't be discounted either. I don't think it's just about the quarterback. I think if you didn't have a supporting cast that you felt you could build around, you may go with the veteran player. Because here's the one thing Steve had that we don't know that Kenny and CJ have, because we've never seen him play meaningful down. If Steve Angeli walks onto the field against Miami in August 31st, he's going to be poised. He's not going to be panicked by the moment. That doesn't mean he's going to play well, but he's going to handle the pressure of being the starting quarterback at Notre Dame well. You do know that. You don't know that about the younger players. So the ideal scenario is that you don't have to ask them to be Riley Leonard in game 1 and game 2 and game 3 because of what you have around him. So I think the circumstance of when these two young players are coming along also helps them, because I don't know if you were going into last year's situation again this year with what's around them, that I'd have been as comfortable maybe or as confident in making that bold choice right away going down into College Station. Meaning, like, if the supporting cast was the same, true freshman left tackle, redshirt freshman left guard, receiving core we're not quite sure about, lost some really good players on defense that we're not sure how we're going to replace them, I don't know that you'd have that same level of confidence. So I also think that going through last year helped Marcus Freeman evolve his thinking, Brian, to your point. Because I think Marcus Freeman right now is a different coach than Marcus Freeman was a year ago at this time. Where I think he realized in September of last year that if we're going to win this whole thing, we've got to be willing to be dynamic on both sides of the football. I think that's the biggest change that we've seen in this regard, and that's, I think, what has led to this. On top of, let's just get down to the nitty-gritty, guys. Brian, you've seen all these kids. You've seen all these kids throw in person. So have I. There's some serious arm talent with Kenny and Minchie and CJ Carr too. This isn't just, well, Steve's not that good. It's about, no, he's a good football player. I've said this, if Steve Angeli's Rutgers starting quarterback last year instead of the kid they had, they're not a 7-win team. They're an 8-9 win team. I think he's a good football player at that kind of level. These kids have the kind of arm talent you look at and be like, they're the ones making the throws that against whoever you play, they have the tools to make the throws that you're just like, I don't know how to teach that. And we saw that on Saturday. I mean, the first two throws that CJ Carr made, you're just like, that's what we're talking about. That's the difference in these guys and what maybe has come before.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to have to live with that a little bit in the first game. They're probably going to have a turnover or something dumb happen against Miami. Yeah. And your defense is going to have to rally. Yeah. You may even give up 7 points real quick because he throws a pick on his second throw, whichever one, whether it's Kenny, whether it's CJ. And that's fine. Let's see what they do in the second half, because I like Notre Dame's defense better than Miami's. No offense. Trying to watch some of Miami's defense last year made my eyes bleed. But they're going to be better this year. They've made a wholesale change on the coaching staff. So bringing in guys like this to attack their weakest point, and that's their secondary. They've had some weird stuff go on there. I mean, they just had a 5-star guy go in the portal that it didn't get worked out. He's a guy that every school in the country offered. They've had a lot of problems. So I don't think it's that big a deal. And you're almost making it easier for yourself long-term, because they're not going to lose both of A&M and Miami anyway. They're not. There's too much defensive talent, and Notre Dame and the O-line's too good. If you get through even 1-1 between the Miami and A&M games, just hypothetically, you're going to make the playoff. And by the time you get there, you've got a guy that can beat Texas or Ohio State or Michigan or whatever school. It ends up being that you have Clemson's probably going to be in the run. whatever teams it is. If you inserted, like if Steve started the year and CJ took over in game 7, game 8, would it be the same?
Right. So then the first high leverage situation for CJ or Kenny is going to be the first round of the playoffs.
Not a
His
good
first
idea.
really big game away from home is going to be the quarterfinals, either in like the Sugar Bowl or the Peach Bowl. It's ridiculous. And then the other thing that I would say is, if you're going to start Steve early and they go 2-0, how do you justify putting him on the bench when he just beat the two best teams that you had?
I think that's why Marcus is doing what he did.
Right, exactly. I never understood that argument. People would point to the situation of, well, they in 2018 where they started Brandon Wimbush at the beginning of the season because they knew we can't beat Michigan without Brandon. Once you get past Michigan, then it was just a matter of time when they were going to turn the reins over to Ian Book. The big difference is you needed Brandon not because he was experienced, but because he was a dynamic athlete going against a defense that you needed a dynamic athlete to beat. You think of that one. I've talked about this before, but that 1 3rd and 10 where Josh Uche comes off the edge, he's got Brandon dead to rights. Brandon spins out, makes a miss, takes off running, and runs for a first down. That's not happening with anyone else on your roster at that time. And so you needed the skill set. It wasn't about him being experienced. And Brandon had started the entire year before and led you to 10-3 record. It wasn't a guy who started one game 2 seasons ago in a bowl game, the Sun Bowl. It's just a completely different situation. Whoever was going to start game 1 needed to be the guy that won the job. And I wasn't sure if they were going to do this or not. I said at the beginning of spring, Trev, you'll remember, I said in the show with Sean, in the back of my head, my last little sliver of BK PTSD still remained. And it was about this decision. Because we have seen this time and time again where they go with the safe option. And I just had this fear, like, would Marcus Freeman actually make it? And a lot of people are like, he's going to start Steve because of this, because of that. It's now officially dead, this decision. And the fact that you didn't try, my understanding, again, this is just what I'm told. My understanding is they did not try, like Marcus Freeman did what he always does. They were honest with everybody about where things stand. They all knew where things stood. And the fact that it's so obvious to everyone, and I mean, look, Trev, you and I were at the last 2 practices. This is not a shock to anyone that was actually paying attention to the last 2 practices. You could see it in Steve's body language. He knew he was getting beat out by those 2 kids. He competed his butt off, and he still battled, but he knew. You could see it when CJ would throw a touchdown pass, you'd see Kenny celebrating. When Kenny would throw a touchdown pass or big pass, you'd see CJ celebrating. You didn't see that from Steve because I think he was, not that he was being a bad teammate. It's just, I think there was a frustration level that he just kind of knew this has been kind of my dream and it's just not going to work out. He knew that these 2 kids were better than him. I think he did deep down. He may not admit it. Maybe he would admit it, but just deep down, I think he knew.
Well, and hear me out. I think that's a testament to Steve, is when you give it your all and then you accept what your role is in the pecking order. That's the reason for it. To your point, Brian, it's not about being a bad teammate and getting in your feelings about, oh, that should be me out there. He did give it his all. You know what I mean? He was at practice every day. He was the longest in the program. He was coming out to battle every single day. And he just saw 2 more talented, younger guys pass him by, and that happens. If Notre Dame's going to continue to recruit at such a high level, this is going to happen at positions not just in the quarterback room. And I think that's something we're going to continue to see as Marcus Freeman's tenure goes on, because that's the goal in order to get to the national championship stage, be a contender year in and year out. It's continually top grading your roster.
Yeah.
And that's what Marcus Freeman's done a really good job of. But fact of the matter remains is now Notre Dame has 1 less quarterback on its roster, and depth charts are going to start formulating here over the next couple months. So, Brian, when you start looking at, Mr. Driscoll, when you start looking at what Notre Dame's depth chart is going to start to look like, where do they go from here now that Steve Angeli is no longer?
As long as nobody else leaves, they're fine. Because they have CJ and Kenny. If they both stay, then they take their battle into the fall. And if CJ wins the job, then I think you find a role for Kenny. If Kenny wins the job, then I think he's the starting quarterback. I don't know that I don't think CJ is a role player type of guy, or a niche player type of guy. And then you got Blake Hebert there in case somebody goes down to step into the number 2 spot, and he can still preserve a red shirt as long as there's no major injuries. The only move that I would consider making right now is I would strongly consider right now talking to Tyler Buckner about moving him back to quarterback. Because as I joked with earlier, I mean, that's the most experienced quarterback you have. That's the guy that has started in Columbus, against Marshall, bowl game against South Carolina, also started a game at Alabama. That's a guy that's played it. Not to come in and compete. Tyler would know you're not competing for the starting job. You're going to help us over here. And then that way, if there's an injury, you don't immediately have to elevate Blake Hebert up to number 2, because you want Blake Hebert to get some eligibility separation between Kenny and CJ is what you want to have. You don't want him being in the same grade eligibility wise as CJ Carr and just a year behind Kenny. You want to get some separation there. So that's the only thing that I would do, is consider moving Tyler Buckner. Now, if one of those two also leaves, then you not only have to go to Tyler Buckner as a sort of an emergency change of pace, dynamic athlete type of quarterback, you also then have to consider going to the portal for a veteran from somewhere that's okay coming in and backing up whoever is the last man standing. So as long as CJ and Kenny both stay, then I don't think there's nothing has to happen. But like I said, I would personally consider moving Tyler back as sort of my emergency quarterback in case, something happens. And then when you look at some of the teams you're going to play this year, I don't think it'd be a terrible idea to have Tyler Buckner back there running around at quarterback on the scout team either. When you're going to play Navy, when you're going to play Arkansas, when you look at some of the teams they're going to play this year, it might not be a bad idea to kind of have that type of player. When you're going to play Texas A&M and Marcel Reed, you don't think chasing Tyler Buckner around all week in practice is going to help you a little bit? Prepare for that kind of game. So I just think there's a lot of positives to that. And before, there's too many people in the room. You could not have afforded to move Tyler back. And I think Tyler kind of needed to go through a win the locker room back over situation after transferring. I think that's happened now. And I would move him back to quarterback. That's the only thing that needs to get done now, as long as CJ and Kenny both stay and take their battle into the fall. Then I think Notre Dame they have no need to go to the portal for another quarterback right now. Now, listen, if an Ivy League kid who started 2 years in the Ivy League wants to come to Notre Dame and get his master's degree and he's totally fine being a clipboard holder and an emergency quarterback, I would not say no, as long as I had the roster room. But I don't think it's something you need to pursue right now. I think you let these two kids battle it out. You let Blake Hebert get some more reps as the sort of the number 3, and then you let Tyler Buckner. I personally would move Tyler Buckner back. And then also we can't ignore that Anthony Rizak's another kid who's a pretty darn good athlete that is not a starting caliber quarterback at a place like Notre Dame, but he's the kind of athlete that can get you out of a ball game if you needed him to. He was best player in the state of Nebraska, I think, his senior year. I believe he won Mr. Football in Nebraska. I have to go back and look at that again. But he was a real dynamic run-throw type of quarterback. Everybody keeps talking about Kenny Minchie's a dual-threat quarterback. He's not. He's a passing quarterback that's really athletic. He was never a dual threat. He had, I think, rushed for 200 yards his junior year and like 50 as a senior. The running part didn't come until he got to Notre Dame and realized, I got to do something different. Anthony Rizak is the true dual threat quarterback on their roster. I mean, he's the guy that got offered by, Air Force and Army and Navy coming out of high school. Well, why were they looking at him at quarterback? Because he can run. So I think the depth chart at quarterback is still in a good place as long as everybody that's on it now stays healthy and stays on campus. But, Brian, I think the stays healthy part is why I would move Buckner now. Because now if Buckner's already there and he's getting work this summer and work in fall camp, if there is an early season injury, Tyler you don't now then turn him from a receiver to a quarterback. That process already started. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't see how you don't. I mean, he's not going to care. He just wants to be at Notre Dame now anyway. And if he can help the team, he's going to do it. And if you get in a really bad spot, he's played before. I mean, I saw him in that game a few years ago, the bowl game, where he was as up and down as it gets. I'm not saying he's great, but he can make throws, and he is a very, very gifted physical athlete.
I think he had 336 yards of offense and 5 touchdowns through 3 picks. but you can't discount the 300 some yards of offense and 5 touchdowns either.
That's what I mean. Like, he's very unusual. Like, I don't think he reads coverages as well as I'd like, but at the same time, you can't teach his feet either. He got out of situations when the O-line screwed up that were all about him. So if they want to move him, I agree. And your other point about Ivy League kid, something like that, Division II quarterback that's just really smart and wants a grad degree, I'm cool with it. I know they got to get down on the rock. Like, that stuff kind of manages itself, but barring somebody else leaving, I think those are the only two things I'd really look at.
Right. And again, we're talking about moving Tyler Buckner back to be an emergency quarterback. That's it. Somebody in the chat said he's slimmed down and not conditioned to play quarterback. Again, that's why you make the move now, so that if that time comes, he can do that. And you're not also putting him back there to be your starting quarterback that's going to play. You'd probably go to Anthony or Blake Hebert before you would necessarily turn the full reins over to Tyler Buckner, but you'd also have to get 2 guys injured before you're turning. This is about having an athletic kid that can give you a great look on scout team, that has been in this spotlight before, that could be a good teammate to the young quarterbacks, but also, as Bryan pointed out, it's got the athleticism, the dynamic athleticism to say, we're going to go run some read zone with Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Tyler Buckner to get out of this game. And then we got a couple passing packages he can do. That's the reason you move this. It's not, just so you're clear, it's not to have Tyler Buckner competing for the starting quarterback job. That time has passed. That opportunity has passed. It's about securing the depth chart in case there's sort of the worst thing that happened. What do you do? There's a lot of teams would be more than happy to turn, if 3 guys go down, to turn the team over to Tyler Buckner and have him run read zone and quarterback power and stuff like that for a game with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the backfield. I think they'll be okay. And that's what we're referring to as far as having him do that. Yeah.
So again, Notre Dame should be in a good spot. The O-line's at a much better place now at this point than they were, especially after fall camp started last year. Notre Dame can use either quarterback and be fine, but I just think the dynamic part, because we haven't even talked about the factor, name 2 teams in college football that have a better running back room than the Irish.
Penn State's the only team that's even in the conversation, and that's because they're 1-2. 3 to 5, they're not even in the same league as Notre Dame,
right,
in my opinion.
So Notre Dame is going to, just by default, how many teams can play cover 2 against Notre Dame? 3, 4?
That's it.
Ohio State, Penn State, Texas.
4th round, right.
There's a handful of teams. Clemson, maybe they got a really good front. But outside of those teams, if you want to play cover 2 against Minchie or Carr, they will get smoked. It'll be 2nd down and 2 all day, either running or passing. Mm-hmm. They can run hitches, slants, draws, and run duo, and it'll be the boringest game you've ever seen, but Notre Dame will score 38 points. So it's going to be either you play single high or you're just really mixing your coverages with match cover 3, that kind of crap, or you're not going to have a chance against them because they got too good of an offensive line and running back. So while not fair comparing them with like they were at Kansas or something, they don't have to be dynamic. Other teams are going to have to adjust to having Jeremiah Love in the backfield. They've got a freak at tight end. The receivers are pretty darn good based on Greathouse. The last 2 games he played, he's probably going to end up in the NFL in some capacity. Notre Dame's skill spots are really, really dynamic. I don't think they're going to struggle that much, even if they have an inexperienced quarterback, because they can just get the ball in space, and quarterback just has the best seat after he throws it to him. Yeah. I don't know if they'll be great on the deep game early on. That's totally to be determined, but their short to intermediate game, because of the running ability, shouldn't be a problem.
Agreed. Well, gentlemen, any more thoughts on Steve Angeli's decision, state of the quarterback room before you guys move on?
I think it's a good time to I would say, Trevor, I don't know if he says to me, I'm shocked that some people are shocked by this.
Why?
Number one is I've been trying to tell you all spring, he's not going to win the job. He's not. I don't know what else is being said by other. I don't speak for others. I can only speak for what we've seen and what we've reported. And me, you, Sean, Vince, we've all who've been there. It's like, there's a very clear, he's not going to win the job. He's not going to be handed the job. I don't know where that came from. The only question was one of these 2. So that doesn't surprise me that this decision is made. I'm glad. I'm glad they did it the way they did it. that gives Steve a chance to go play for a couple more years. But no matter how I felt about the fact that Steve should not have been the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, Steve Angeli is going to be one of those kids that's always going to kind of live in the Notre Dame lore because of, and he's earned that right. You know, stepping into the bowl game the way that he did and playing the way he did. But even more importantly, even though, like, I don't need to get caveats, but we've broken it down. But the poise and calm he showed stepping into the Orange Bowl with the team down 10-0. The starting quarterback gets knocked out. There's 2 minutes left in the half. All the pressure's now on you. And to just make the throws and get them down in field goal range and get that point, he's always going to be remembered for that and should. And he's a kid that was a great teammate. He was a kid that had great poise and confidence. He worked his tail off. He's leaving with a Notre Dame degree. This is a kid that did it right, in my opinion. He did it right. And when his opportunity came, he gave everything he had. That's what we should remember about Steve Angeli. Not all the other topics that people wanted to turn it into. He was never going to beat out these two kids. They're just too good. In a lot of other years, 2022, Steve Angeli is better than the guy that spent most of the year starting a quarterback for Notre Dame in 2022. He just was. He just happened to be at Notre Dame at a time when Tommy Rees went a little bit buck wild with recruiting quarterbacks and was able to get Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr in back-to-back classes. And it's a bummer for Steve, for him personally. It's great for Notre Dame, but none of that takes away from the fact that when this young man's number was called, he did what he needed to do and showed great poise and calm and maturity and like I said, great teammate. Players loved him, all that kind of stuff. That should be the memory of Steve Angeli's time at Notre Dame. And that it won't be getting beat out, it'll be that. And that can never be taken away. And when Notre Dame goes and starts a run that I think they're about to start, Brian, we're going to get your thoughts on that here soon. We're going to look back at this 2024 season and all the things that happened as the year that really turned the corner for Notre Dame. And whenever we have that memory and we reminisce about this season, we're always going to remember Steve coming off the bench down 10-0 and helping to put that drive together. And I'm going to respect the heck out of the kid from that. I mean, I always have and always will respect the heck out of that kid. But I also, again, think Notre Dame, they made the right decision. And it is time for either the CJ or Kenny era to start at Notre Dame. That's the present and the future. But it doesn't take away from anything that Steve Angeli did in his tenure at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I think that it's cool that he stuck it out as long as he did. A lot of guys would have bailed going into spring. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, folks, that's going to do it for our recap of Steve Angeli's decision to enter the transfer portal. There's going to be a lot more news coming out. Brian and I are going to have a lot more things breaking down Notre Dame's offseason. We're just now getting around to putting a bow on spring and moving into the thick of the offseason. Brian and Bryan are getting ready to move on, talk about the Miami preview, Notre Dame big picture, where they stand in the grand landscape of college football. But until you get there, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, best way to support what we do here at Irish Breakdown is subscribe to the premium message boards at irishbreakdown.com.
Boards.irishbreakdown.com is where the premium message board is.